Hey friends, welcome back to the study. As the film and digital media editor of The Public Historian, and as a teacher of public history at Johns Hopkins, my work involves understanding how digital platforms serve or hinder the work of public historians so that we can engage our students in that process and have them be better public historians as we enter the second quarter of the 21st century and as we look to actually broaden and define and understand our field, who we are and what we do as public historians. And so to really properly engage in that, understanding the dynamics of these digital ecosystems are crucial. Now, while they offer spaces to engage broader audiences, they can also amplify gatekeeping, which has a much different kind of impact. Those kind of behaviors that run counter to the principles of public history. And one public intellectual recently responded to President Biden's pardon of his son Hunter and offered a clear example of how public intellectuals can misuse platforms to limit discussion rather than foster it. They may accomplish their own aims, but they hinder public history's goals. So let's take a look at this in the context of a recent post as a case study. I absolutely do not care. You cannot make me. Do not try. Is not just a refusal to engage. This is an act of gatekeeping. It might serve his ends, but it gets in the way of ours. Because it's actually an act of gatekeeping that even hinges on partisanship. And that prevents a critical conversation from taking place, the kind of conversations that it's our responsibility to engage in. Agree with me? Or else? By threatening to block anyone raising the issue from his gaze, Kruse shuts down the opportunity for a broader discussion about the constitutional and historical implications of the pardoning power. And this is where the deeper problem lies, folks. Avoiding these discussions reinforces partisan divides and misses the chance to confront the real issues. The founders' failure to impose meaningful limits on the pardoning power. Oops, the anti-federalists might have been right again. This is a structural flaw in the Constitution. It's not a partisan one. The framers left the door open for the pardoning power to be used without accountability. They left the document silent on this, regardless of who occupies the office. Whether it's Biden pardoning his son or any other president exercising that power in controversial ways, the lack of safeguards demands scrutiny. We need to re-examine the Constitution and question the framers and leave that open. They might have gotten it wrong again. Ignoring it doesn't serve our audiences. It doesn't serve broader engagement. It simply reinforces partisanship. Now, again, he can do whatever it is that he does, but our work requires us to position ourselves to uniquely address these kind of structural issues. Unlike public intellectuals, an issue that we have been exploring in the Public Historian Journal, unlike public intellectuals who use platforms like Substack or Blue Sky to dominate the narrative and dictate the terms of engagement, we work to create spaces for open dialogue, sometimes quite literally in museum and other physical places. But our goal is not to shut down conversation, but to facilitate it in informed ways, to invite audiences to grapple with complexity, to challenge assumptions, and to connect past decisions to present consequences. How does history matter in your life? The digital ecosystem plays a critical role in this. Platforms like Blue Sky, Twitter, TikTok certainly, Instagram to a lesser extent, they can either foster meaningful engagement or they can just serve as echo chambers that ratchet up depending upon the number of likes and shares that you get. But it all depends on how they're used. We can talk about intermedial engagement. We can talk about transmedial engagement. Talk about intergenerational engagement. But gatekeeping, like the kind Kruse exhibits here, is just as harmful to, and this is not overstating it, I don't think, it's just as harmful as the distortions of pseudohistorians and pseudo-archaeologists. While pseudo-history spreads misinformation, gatekeeping silences discussion altogether. And both outcomes undermine the public's ability to think critically about history and its implications. One sends you in the wrong direction, the other one stops you in your tracks. And this is why public history's role in digital media is so essential. And understanding the dynamics of these digital media platforms is essential. As public historians, we aim to engage audiences in challenging but necessary conversations. The more challenging, the better. The more uncomfortable, the more valuable. Especially when we're getting into issues such as the Constitution's flaws, the limits of power, and the ways in which history shapes the present. And discussions about presidential pardons, for instance, shouldn't devolve into partisan squabbling or be dismissed outright. Instead, they should prompt deeper reflection on how structural issues within the Constitution enable these controversies in the first place. Maybe the framers got it wrong again. So by using digital platforms to create spaces for dialogue, public historians push back and need to push back against the limitations of both gatekeeping, stopping you in your tracks, and misinformation, sending you down the wrong track. Engagement, not dismissal, productive movement is the cornerstone of public history. It's basically what we do. It's in the name. If it's not about engagement, then we ain't doing anything but talking to ourselves. If we fail to have these conversations because they're uncomfortable or for some politically inconvenient, we fail in our mission to serve our public. The Biden pardon deserves discussion, not dismissal, and public historians are here to make sure that discussion happens. Now, Kevin Kruse can keep doing whatever it is that he does. I don't care. But that does shine a spotlight on what public historians need to do, how we need to engage as we enter turbulent times. So to dive deeper into the growing distinctions as we see it within our field, distinctions, maybe even divisions, between public history and public intellectuals, I highly recommend this article from our journal, published just last year, Overlapping Origins, Diverging Paths, Public History and the Public Intellectual, a terrific piece written by Professor Mike Brown at Rochester Institute of Technology. Let's be careful out there.